You've already disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a jagoff is?
I don't think I need to, sir.
Why not?
Because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Things have really developed in a great place here in America. When you have a Senate confirmation hearing with a potential defense secretary having to explain his usage of the word jagoff in referring to a JAG officer when he was in the military. So before I kind of elaborate on what spurred that comment from Pete Hegseth, Cenk, what are your thoughts?
All right, well, that was a hilarious exchange. Okay, my thought is that Pete, look, my number one concern is this guy going to say yes when Trump says use the military against US citizens? He asked his former defense secretary, Mark Esper, to do that. And Esper partly said yes when he cleared Lafayette Square, and that was already terrible. But when Trump suggested shooting US citizens in the leg with the US military, that's where Esper drew the line and said no. I get the overwhelming sense from Hegseth's answers and his entire record is he will do anything Trump tells him to do. Well, to me, the most clear part of these hearings, Anna, was Hegseth saying over and over again that he would basically serve Trump rather than the Constitution or the laws.
Yeah, I mean, he did pay lip service to the Constitution and the importance of following and protecting the Constitution in his opening statement. But I agree with you. After watching almost the entirety of the hearing today, the sense I got is that he is deeply loyal to Donald Trump. And so if Donald Trump asks him to do something, which, by the way, would be unconstitutional, the US military should not be used against the American people. I also worry about the possibility of Pete Hegseth following through and giving Trump what he wants. Now, that was a funny moment in the hearing, but there were plenty of unfunny moments. Before we get to those, before we get to the actual substance, I just want to clarify what this whole controversy is with the jagoff comment. So the New York Times reported on this, and they found that in his book, The War on Warriors, Hegseth detailed comments that he himself made to his military platoon. Hegseth made the comment during his Iraq deployment in 2005 after hearing a presentation by a JAG officer or a member of the US Army Judge Advocate General's Corps who defend Army soldiers in legal matters. After he and his team were briefed by the JAG officer on the proper protocols for firing on an enemy with a rocket-propelled grenade, Hegseth disparaged one of the rules of engagement, saying it was going to get people killed, he recalled in his book. So I guess since he didn't like what he was hearing from the JAG officer, he used the clever insult of calling him a jagoff. And so he was so proud of it that he wrote about it in his book, which is hilarious.
And my main concern about that is he doesn't believe in the rules of war.
Yeah.
Made that clear several times, including in that exchange there. So, but that one people voted for. They didn't vote for him to necessarily use the US military inside the country. That's not the independent side who decided the election. They didn't vote in that direction. They didn't vote for him to be a Christian Zionist. But they did, unfortunately, vote for Trump, who's clearly not a person concerned about war crimes. Yeah. So Hegseth is basically saying, yeah, war crimes are, open season now. So war crimes, not just for Israel anymore.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that what has happened in Gaza has pretty much deteriorated any semblance of international order, international law. The United States under the Biden administration has aided and abetted the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent civilians. We have provided the weaponry, the military funding for that. So I would love to do a comparative analysis and say, there are examples of better options, especially on the Democratic side, but that did not come to fruition during the Biden administration, unfortunately. Now, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, I think, did a good job drawing attention to one of the biggest concerns that people have about Pete Hegseth, and it is his remarks in regard to women in combat roles. He has spread a lot of disinformation about what kind of standards apply to women if they want to serve in combat roles. So I'm gonna break that all down for you after we watch this clip. Take a look.
You answered your questionnaire. Do you believe that any American who wants to serve in their country in the military and can meet objective standards set by the military should be allowed to serve without limitation? You've said yes to that question. But then in all of these other circumstances, you've denigrated active duty service members. We have hundreds of women who are currently in the infantry. Lethal members of our military serving in the infantry, but you degrade them. You say, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. As secretary, would you take any action to reinstitute the combat arms exclusion for female service members, knowing full well you have hundreds of women doing that job right now? So please explain these types of statements, because they're brutal and they're mean and they disrespect men and women who are willing to die for this country.
Now, before we get to Hegseth's answer to what Senator Gillibrand is asking there, I just want to give some clarification about how recently Hegseth made those types of comments. So as recently as November 7th of last year, 2024, Hegseth said this while appearing on the Sean Ryan show, quote, "The standards have been lowered," meaning the standards for women who want to serve in combat roles. "I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles." Now, with that in mind, here's how he answered the question. Take a look.
I spent months talking to active duty service members, men and women, low ranks, high ranks, combat arms and not combat arms. And what each and every one of them told me, and which personal instances have shown me, is that in ways direct, indirect, overt, and subtle, standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions, to ensure that
Give me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized statements.
Commanders meet quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women
Commanders
who are
do
incredibly
not have to
capable
meet
of meeting
quotas
that
for the
standard.
infantry. Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force.
So, Cenk, before we go to you, I just want to say, I don't trust anyone. I don't care what party they're in. If it's a politician speaking, if it's a media figure speaking, I'm just going to assume they're lying, and I want to confirm what they're saying, whether it's true or false. And so I didn't take what Kirsten Gillibrand was saying there at face value. I wanted to look into it, because you never know. Sometimes they say there aren't quotas and it turns out there are quotas. So I looked into this, and based on what is clearly listed in the Defense Department's website, okay, they have 7 guidelines. I'm gonna read guideline 2 and 3 because they're the most relevant to the conversation we're having right now. Number 2, leaders must assign tasks and jobs throughout the force based on ability, not gender. Equal opportunity, this is guideline 3, equal opportunity likely will not mean equal participation by men and women in all specialties, and there will be no quotas. There are far fewer women, far fewer women in combat roles in the military than men. And it's because they did not lower the standards when it comes to the physical tests that they must pass in order to qualify for said combat roles. And so Senator Gillibrand is telling the truth here. For the physical standards, let me give you a little more information. In 2022, the Army did lower general physical standards for men and older troops, female and male, but that only applies to the annual physical fitness exam, and that's for the general military, not for combat roles. Let's talk about combat roles. The Army and all of the branches still require women to pass strict fitness tests if they want to take on the most physically challenging specialty jobs like an Army Ranger or Green Beret. So I looked into this. Senator Gillibrand is telling the truth. Hegseth, unfortunately, along with others, is spreading misinformation about this. And so, Cenk, I don't know where that stems from. I mean, when you look at the military overall, only 18% of the military comprises of women. So the hyper focus on women in combat roles is just so ridiculous. We have a real problem in the country with recruiting for the military, partly because we do have an obesity problem in America. So in general, Americans are not healthy enough to be recruited into the military. That is a broader problem, and I think it's interesting that he doesn't focus on that.
Yeah, I think that his answers were active duty.
He said duty.
Yeah. So look, part of the point of these confirmation hearings is to get them to denounce their extreme statements of the past. Now, whether they actually denounce them in the real world, like meaning when he gets the job after he gets past these fake confirmation hearings, is another question. As our members have written in, it's Supreme Court justices also said they wouldn't do things. And if you remember, in every one of those hearings, whether they're Republican appointed or Democrat appointed, I'd always tell you they're not telling you the truth at all. The Democrats appointed ones are going to do strictly liberal rulings, pretty much, except some pro-corporate rulings, and the Republicans are going to do strictly conservative decisions. And in this case, Hegseth is not going to be able to overturn a historic decision by the US military to have women in combat roles, and they're getting him to say over and over again that he won't try to do that. So there's some value in that. But does Hegseth believe nonsense stuff in his head about how they're creating quotas, et cetera, when there aren't any? Yeah, he definitely believes that. And why has he said that throughout his career when there's no evidence of it? Because let's be honest, Republican voters love to hear things like that. And so sometimes with extreme versions of DEI, there's some merit to. It's like some on the left tried to live up to the caricature that Fox News created of a left winger, okay? But outside of that, there's this like aggrievement industrial complex where they're like, oh my God, the reason our military is not strong is because they took it away from white men or just men in general. Oh, we had this, we didn't want any of these other people involved. But wait a minute, look at that initial premise to begin with. Why are we having this insane conversation? The US military is not weak. The US military is the strongest military in the history of the world, and by a lot. So the whole conversation is utter nonsense. We've had women in the military for a long time and in combat roles, and we're still by far the strongest military the world has ever seen.
Well, Cenk, unfortunately, some remain unconvinced. We earlier talked about some of the people who showed up to protest Pete Hegseth. There were some at the hearing specifically to protest the notion of women in these roles and the competency of the military. And so I wanted to show you that fun protester. It's a still shot of his protest. Mainly, I want you to take a look at his sign. Let's take a look. DEI, military. And then yeah, fun. So, competence is important. Competence is important.
Yeah. But that goes towards like, in law school, they teach you a slippery slope slides in both directions, right? And so in this case, DEI slides in both directions. A lot of Republicans run in red districts or red states, and all they have to do is breathe and speak English, kind of. And if they're a white male, they're gone, they're in, right? So like this idiot and everyone in his office who are all idiots, and everyone else involved, they're like, we'll make fun of minorities, and we'll say the DEI has ruined the military. And they can't even spell military right. Why? Because they're a DEI hire. Because they just showed up and they're like, oh, duh, I'm a male and I'll do whatever Trump says. Okay, dude, you're DEI. So this DEI charge is like I said just a second ago. Sometimes some on the left do extreme things, and if you point that out, I go, okay, you know what? I hear you on that. I really do. But when you just use it in a blanket statement, you sound like you're a racist jackass. That's that answer.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think a really good example of that is how people reacted to the fire chief in Los Angeles, who, I want to be absolutely clear, has done an excellent job, okay? The fire chief in Los Angeles, considering the budget cuts she's dealt with, considering the fact that the department has been chronically underfunded. It's not just about a one-time budget cut. It's been chronically underfunded. They have done an excellent job in fighting these fires, putting their lives on the line to protect human beings, their homes, their businesses. So when you see a woman who might be lesbian or transgender or whatever, and your automatic reaction to it is DEI hire without even doing any analysis into whether or not they have done a good job, yeah, you come across as a bigot or racist or any of those words, right? Depending on the identity of the person who's being attacked. But the one thing I will say, this is a really important point I want to make. Look, I really want people to stop saying dumb things, because a member of the fire department did say this, and I don't think it helped, okay? And I see this happening across the board in different sectors of the economy, different departments. Stop saying things like, people, like when I'm saving someone from a burning home, they really want to see someone who looks like them.
No, they don't.
No, I don't. I want you to save my home, save me. I don't care about your race. I don't care about your gender. I don't care about your identity at all. Stop saying stuff like that. Because I don't think most people think that way. Most people just want qualified, competent people to fill these roles. That's it.
Yeah. So I saw that video you're talking about, Anna, and it's really so super dumb. So if you find an example that is outlandish like that, great, no problem. We'll say it's outlandish, right? So no, if I'm in a burning fire, which by the way now is like somewhat lightly in LA, I don't give a damn if it's a transgender person, a Muslim, a Christian, a dude, a woman. I don't care at all. Just save my family, right? And unfortunately, the cultural wars are engaged by both sides. So they make that dumb video about, oh, so you want to be rescued by someone of your own race? Why? It's so dumb. Anyway, and then the right wing turns around and says, no, every woman is a DEI hire. So there's no women who are qualified to be in the military, to be in the fire department, to have any job. And you don't think that comes across as sexist? So I despise these culture wars. Last thing on this is one of our members, Jesus Take the Wheel, I think accurately points out why they do this. He wrote in, it's a classic conservative misdirection. The military is corrupt and immoral, but conservatives blame all the issues on woke lesbians or whatever.
Bingo.
Yeah, they don't want you to pay attention to the fact that they can't pass an audit. And every year they're like, I don't know where $400 billion went. Oh, is it in my pocket? And is it in the pocket of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin? Well, somebody's woke. Somebody's woke, okay? To get mad at a lesbian. Come on, guys, both sides, cut the crap out about culture wars and actually try to protect this country, including our pocketbooks, from the thieves at the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex.
Absolutely. I mean, the future of this country really depends on that. And so we're gonna keep demanding it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.